influencer with Ben, which we co-founded about micro and all sorts of influencers with over 10,000 followers on a platform to brands around the world.
Not really sure what sort of intro I can give, aside from obviously replicating what Caspar said. But obviously, as you mentioned, yeah, we both co-founded influencer.com. We do global creative influence and insights.
Excellent. So give us a little brief sort of history of the company.
So it was a Tinder success story, I suppose. I matched someone on Tinder a few years ago, and it happened to be one of Ben's really good friends. And we dated for a while, and he eventually convinced her to introduce us. We met at the bottom of my building, and it was love at first sight. I decided to go all the way in and start Influencer with Ben, and that's when we founded it back in, this was 3 years ago, 2017.
Yep.
Time.
Back then. And then, yeah, I guess since Caspar and I came on board, it was really interesting because Caspar's obviously very creator-focused. Myself is very advertiser-focused. So it's that balance, which I guess has grown Influencer up to the company it is today. We've scaled up. We've done multiple investment rounds. We've opened up offices around the world in Kiev, New York, and obviously got our HQ in London. And yeah, we run some really awesome campaigns, do global accounts for the likes of Alibaba. We work on the likes of Starbucks, Uber Eats, these sort of brands as well.
Amazing. So how many people have you got working for you now?
So there's around 50 in London, and then there's around 6 in Kiev, and then there's a small number, even smaller number in New York.
Amazing. So Caspar, how has the transition been for you going from obviously a huge influencer to owning a huge influencer company?
Yeah, I think it's been an interesting one. It's been difficult to kind of start to do these sorts of events because before I was just behind a camera and not having to meet too many people in real life. Obviously, when the whole YouTube thing did blow up, you started to do events with your viewers, and that was quite easy compared to doing it in front of people who were trying to learn something about business. So that's kind of been an interesting transition, but also utilizing the fact that on YouTube, the only way I grew my channel was to collaborate, and that's the same on all social media. And the same with building a business. It's very similar skills. I think most businesses, obviously they have different USPs and do unique things, but the idea of kind of partnering with the right people is probably kind of paramount to any success. So it's a pretty similar model, I suppose, in how I manage myself and how I manage the company.
So how do you, like, how is the balance between, obviously, like, you know, kids come up to you and be like, and then obviously the business side of things?
It was weird because like yesterday even I worked with hotels.com on a campaign, and that morning we had like a very serious board meeting, and then we went into, I did this video in which I had to jump in an ice bath before I went to watch a football match. So it was like kind of weird, like the transition. But yeah, it's pretty much kind of 3 days a week focusing on the business stuff and try and put at least 2 days a week on creating content for my audience.
Amazing. So what is the difference, would you say, between an influencer and a creator?
Yeah.
And when do you think a brand should sort of consider using either?
Yeah, I think we prefer the word creator. I think everyone who creates content that people are following them for the content is when they're a creator, whereas when people are just following someone maybe because they're famous or they, maybe they came off a reality show or something like that, then I think they're more of an influencer. But then again, going back to that, if someone's famous, there's probably something they're doing quite interesting. So I think for me, we like to use the word creators, and also it's not a type of person. It's just it's a whole array of verticals.
Yeah, I mean, we don't actually have, despite our name obviously being influencer, a single mention of the word influencer as, that type of person across any of our sales deck, across any of our website. And it's for the purpose, as Caspar said, that we focus on those influential content creators, these creators who built up the audience because of the content that they have created. And you tend to find that with these creators, they have much niche audiences. So it might be, a fitness blogger who's grown their audience through posting fitness videos, or you might find someone who's, a home designer who's grown up their audience posting home design-related posts. So those are the types of audience that we tend to target.
Amazing. So do you prefer working with micro or macro creators? I know you guys have got some a lot of thoughts on this.
I mean, for us, we would always say, the best campaigns are using both. There's definitely value in using macro creators because, just to, I guess to get everyone on the same page with definitions, what we define as a micro creator is someone with between 10,000 followers and 100,000 followers. Someone as a macro creator is between 100,000 and 1 million. And then you've got the hero creators who tend to be often celebrities now who are over 1 million. And we see the benefits, as I mentioned, in using all three. I think the larger ones, they have that name association factor, and people recognize them immediately when they see the actual person. And then with the smaller ones, as I mentioned, because they've got these niche communities, the relationship with their followers tends to be much closer because ultimately, due to their size, they can be much closer. So yeah, an effective campaign tends to use both. You've got a great analogy about the playground effect.
Well, no, that's not a great analogy. But I guess it's something that, some people feel potentially closer to micro influencers or creators because they found them themselves and they might be their secret person they're friends with online. Whereas the macro ones, it's more kind of like everyone at school might be talking about them, or in the office will be like, oh, did you see that new video by so-and-so? So it's kind of different conversations that you're trying to build. And also, I think the difference is I would probably use macro creators not just on their own channels, but take content that they've created and put it on maybe your channel, or put paid spend behind it, or even take it out of home. Whereas I wouldn't do that as much with micro creators.
Cool. So with more and more brands using creators / influencers, how do you sort of stay ahead of the curve in the industry?
I mean, for us, as I sort of mentioned when I described what we actually do, when I said global creative influence and insights, the two key words there are creative and insights. I think insights is something which we're heavily investing in. We hired the ex-director of data science from Kantar to basically think some fresh insights on the industry, because there's quite a lot of influencer marketing players out there who just basically repackage the same insights out. So it's really, really important to be a little bit more unique. So we're just about to launch IBM Watson into our platform, and that's going to be doing much more around personality profiling, as well as pieces just in terms of language understanding of what the comments actually say and mean, and then of course the natural social listening about the brand across various social networks. So insights is definitely something which we're really, really focused on. And the other word I mentioned is creative. So no matter how good your data is, if your strategy is completely wrong, an influencer campaign won't necessarily work. So creative is something which we're heavily investing in. We just hired a new creative strategy lead from a company called Playbuzz. And it's something where people often have a master marketing plan, and they try and then give that brief to the creators and assume that the creators can actually produce content off that. And you'll just get all different types of content which won't necessarily marry up. So it's much more important to have that layer in between, which is your influencer marketing strategy, which stems from your master marketing strategy. And then you can give that to creators to produce more effective content.
And yeah, you're so right. The industry's grown a lot, and there's so many players within it. But I think something that we still are all trying to figure out, and what we're really focusing on, is speed. Because there's just what it takes sometimes to do a influencer marketing campaign is just there's way too many hurdles and way too many people getting in between the brand and the creator, and we want to by eliminating a lot of the in-betweeners, we want to create that speed and also standardize a lot of the language that the brands and the creators are using. I mean, a simple analogy would be sometimes you get a situation in which a brand's like, oh, I want to pay for a story, but they might not even know does that mean 1 frame, 3 frames, So things like that are also something we're really looking to work on.
I think just to sort of stem on what Caspar was saying there is about education. I think influencer marketing, unfortunately, is an industry where there's just so much shit in it. People are saying multiple different things, and then it's basically saying, there's a lack of consistency. So we're working with quite a few of our competitors as well, just to try and get that consistent messaging across the board. And I do believe that, there's a group of companies in the industry who can become the educators. And I think that's important to kind of marry up to the rest of the advertising industry as a whole, where we can get, universal definitions of all these different types of words.
No, absolutely agreed, yeah. So what do you think of the benefits in influencer marketing are over a traditional sort of paid media campaign?
So I think, that's a question we get asked time and time again. People often ask that question as though they assume that one replaces the other. So I definitely believe that influencer marketing is the perfect complementary form of marketing to other forms of marketing. The reason being is, I wouldn't say spend 100% of your marketing budget on influencer marketing because you won't have an effective strategy. Using influencers as well isn't just getting the influencers to post on their social channels. You can be using the influencers in other forms of marketing. We're seeing it more in TV. We're also seeing it much more in billboard advertising. The biggest thing we often get asked about in campaigns now is the reusage rights, where else they can reuse the content. We did a fantastic campaign with Arto Water, which is PepsiCo's new water. And they repurposed all of the influencer content on the out-of-home billboards and on tube adverts. And that type of campaign is just showing how it's a complementary product. But of course, there are benefits to using influencer marketing as opposed to other forms of traditional marketing, as well as obviously weaknesses. But the benefits include obviously having that close relationship of someone actually saying a message as opposed to necessarily a brand dictating the message. Because ultimately, it's just word of mouth, but on social media.
I thought you were going to say word of mouth redefined.
That used to be our trademark slogan. Well, it's still trademark anymore. Grown up since then.
So when do you think brands should sort of take the dive into influencer marketing? And what would you say to a brand who was on the fence to convince them?
It's tough. It depends, on the type of brand and what product they're trying to sell. I think, a startup, I would use it as more of a vehicle to get your brand name out there rather than, I think sometimes when people are, they're just introducing their brand or product to a market, I wouldn't say try and go straight for sales through influencer marketing. Maybe use it as more as a vehicle to get your brand out there. We're also interested in looking into B2B influencer marketing. That's something else we would definitely want to look at. And I believe that LinkedIn is going to be a massive way into getting into that. By the way, if you guys have LinkedIn, please add me. I'd love to accept. But yeah.
Yeah, I think attached to what you were saying as well, it's often a question where people hear about influencer marketing and then they just have a rush to do it without much thought. I think they just see other brands doing it and they thought, let's just throw a load of money at it and see what happens. But I think it's really important to understand, what existing forms of marketing they're doing and why those aren't working, and then how we can adapt the influencer strategy to perhaps combat some of those weaknesses. But no, it's definitely a growing industry where we're seeing much, people being more willing to try, especially, the big brands and the big agencies.
Oh yeah, just another point on that. So you don't necessarily, or obviously I shouldn't say this because we do like to be paid to do it at influencer, but another way of potentially as a smaller company getting involved and reaching a larger audience is potentially reaching out for investment from creators. Recently I started a creative investment club with about 15 creators from around the UK and US, and we've actually found some really cool companies that we're willing to also invest into and get behind because they're so interesting. So I think if you have a really good idea like that, also add me on LinkedIn. That could be a cool way of doing it.
I was so nervous what you were going to say there.
But I'm just saying, you don't necessarily. There are more creative ways sometimes to get going if you don't have the budget, because it is a very expensive thing to do as a startup.
What you've also stemmed on then is, I guess, the point earlier, which is, if you're a little bit anxious about influencer marketing, you don't necessarily have to try a full-scale influencer marketing campaign. You can try using influencers in your other forms of marketing you're currently trying and seeing what natural uplift you can get there. There's a bunch of data out there and a bunch of research. So what we're also doing now, actually we launched it last week, it's called Influencer Labs. It's essentially workshops to try and educate the market on how to run successful influencer marketing campaigns, how influencer marketing differs from traditional forms of advertising, but also how to run campaigns in the likes of TikTok, new up-and-coming social network. Well, not really anymore, but, up there already, and how to run campaigns across other social networks as well.
So just how important is having a strong personal brand for a creator?
I think it depends on what platform. I think on YouTube, it was so important for who you were, was how well your videos were going to do, and the amount of subscribers you may have had, or how big your audience was. But I think now the algorithms are developing. I don't know if this does answer your question, but I've seen more creators with a smaller audience and not as large or as long of a brand being able to get massive views just because people are watching their full video. So the watch time being so strong. So watch time is basically what percentage of the video people are watching. for example, my roommate Josh, like his name's Josh Peters. I'm not sure if anyone saw his Katie Hopkins video. If you did, yeah, lots of. I mean, that's a fair amount. It kind of shows you. Obviously, he has been building this over a few months, and he's had a channel for a while. But all of a sudden, he's making videos that people can't stop watching. So it just shows you, like, obviously collaborate, work hard, build your brand, do all these things, but don't forget to make really interesting content.
I think on personal brand, especially as a creator, is so important, simply because of the word of trust. I think trust is a word which consistently pops up within the influencer marketing industry, and having that strong personal brand can help to, I guess, give advertisers that trust that you're someone who can minimize brand risk and be brand safe. So it's something which we take massive pride in. We take pride in being one of the most vetted and actual trusted network of creators. We have, hundreds of creators applying every day, but we only allow a very, very small percentage within our network. And that's ultimately because we've gone for the route of quality over quantity. I think it's much more important for advertisers to be able to choose from a smaller network of creators they know are going to be brand safe, who they know are actually going to deliver strong impact, rather than having to filter through hundreds of thousands.
And that's how we work. I do the creator answer, and he does the brand answer. Good partnership.
So how is advancing technology like streaming and AR affecting the market, and how are you guys embracing those developments?
So we actually haven't done an AR campaign as of yet, but I actually saw one of our competitors do one of the best AR campaigns I've ever seen. It was Social Chain. They did a campaign on, it was with Samsung, and it was essentially an AR campaign across Instagram stories where you had to follow certain routes, and then eventually you got to the account where you could win a Samsung phone. And I've seen that being a really smart adoptive strategy.
You endorsed a competitor.
I mean, I think it's important to endorse good work when you see good work, and I think you'll see more brands adopting that. I think, obviously, as well, that's just one side of the things. Actually, that's a lie. We have done an AR campaign. I've just remembered. We did one with Domino's, and that was when Domino's had an Instagram filter, and they got creators to actually use the Instagram filter to help promote it. So I do remember. Domino's going to be annoyed at me for saying that. Let's cut that bit.
So the influencer industry has obviously grown enormously in the last 5 years. Where do you see it in 5 years' time?
I mean, I think it's just going to keep growing in terms of the budget and the spend. I think it's going to be interesting to see how many creators who are here now are going to be able to continue to do what they're doing. I think you'll see I'm seeing new ones come up all the time, and like new voices and people who are going to smash all the records that have been set already. And I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. I can say that.
Yeah. So I think, as I sort of touched on earlier about complementary to other forms of advertising, I think as influencer marketing grows up, what you'll see is, other forms of marketing being much more welcoming, and you're seeing, influencers playing a much bigger part in that. We're already seeing the developments where almost, like every campaign we now get briefed on, there is an element of paid spend having to be attached. So it's really, really important to have those, partnerships with the likes of, like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and the other social networks out there to help amplify the content across those social networks. So I think that's definitely where the future of influencer marketing is going, because brands need that extended reach, and they want to be doing it both from the creator as well as from their branded accounts. We're just about to sign partnerships with a big ad network, which unfortunately I can't mention today, but that's going to be seeing influencer content put elsewhere. You're going to be seeing it on much more like premium publishers. So again, you are seeing the industry growing up where other forms of advertising are welcoming influencer marketing within it.
And I think a lot of those other forms of those brands like your Vogue, your GQ, all these things. I mean, I've seen the way they've started to smash their own kind of you would say influencer channels like YouTube, Instagram, etc. The sophistication in which and the time and money they're spending on there is just incredible. So what's great is it's allowing us as the audience to consume better and better content, because people are having to put more and more effort to compete with these sorts of companies.
So TikTok's obviously come and taken the world by storm. What do you sort of attribute that success to, and how do you think brands can sort of jump on and ride the wave?
I think it's kind of, does anyone use Canva? I'm not sure. Canva, like the fact that you can you feel like you could become a designer because you get templates, and so you just pull it in. And I think TikTok is like, you see the trend, you see exactly what you can do it yourself, they give you the features, so anyone can be a creator. And then also the ability that people do go viral on there, kind of like in the early days of YouTube, where you could do something that could just be put on the front page. I think that's what excites the younger generation, who we already know want to potentially become they want to be YouTubers, they want to be vloggers. There was statistics which were crazy, saying that it was one of the top jobs that they wanted to go after. So I think
The top job. Obviously, when we were younger, it was like you wanted to become a a footballer, and now everyone wants to become a YouTuber.
Yeah, or a TikToker now.
Or a TikToker, should I say?
Which is great. And I think that's just it's so nice to have a structure in place where you're not having to start from scratch like on YouTube. Like, how do you go about creating your first video without a template? You know what I mean? You kind of watch other people, but it's a lot. The barrier to entry is a little bit higher. So TikTok makes that completely
I
easier.
think there's two things with TikTok as well. I think since Vine went away, people miss that short form content sprints. I think that's perhaps why like Instagram stories became very popular. But then people still weren't able to do, I guess, more that type of content, which was permanent. And I think TikTok brought that back. Obviously, Bytes now come about, which is Vine 2.0. But I think, that's why TikTok really kicked off. But then attached to that as well, I know TikTok have been doing a massive boost in supporting creators. I think, as Caspar mentioned, there's quite a bit of perhaps saturation on the other social networks, where it's quite hard to actually become, or grow your following on those social networks. And the only real way you can do it on these social networks now is through collaborating with people who have the following and you kind of springboarding off them.
Or taking Katie Hopkins to Prague.
That's one way as well. But I think what TikTok are doing is they're helping to support creators by putting them on their homepage, which is helping them go viral and get that extended reach, and really supporting creators in producing their content.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had some first-hand experience with that very recently. We've got like a food page within our network, with our company, and I cooked some roast potatoes on a Sunday, as you do, and they were fantastic, obviously. And I ran my fork across roast potatoes to get that really nice, crispy sort of sound, and it hit the main page on TikTok. It got like hundreds of thousands of views, and that's a personal career highlight for me.
But also, how long did that even? Obviously, you took time to create the potatoes, but it wasn't at the longest shoot.
You're looking at you have to parboil them. That's probably a 10-minute, and then 50 minutes in the oven. 220.
Whereas I guess now to try and do that on YouTube, it's
a lot more difficult, and also it's literally a video that I filmed on my phone, rather than have the whole camera set up, have the lighting set up, have the fairy lights and stuff in the background. Like, there's none of that. It's just simply a bowl of roast potatoes, and they were fantastic.
So was that the first viral one from this feed page?
The first viral one for that page, and obviously I've grown. I think 4,000, 5,000 from just that one video. None of the other ones have had the same success. If I'm filming my Dominoes, it's I don't know. I haven't hit the same dizzy heights of the roast potatoes, but listen, I'll get there. It's only Scrans, by the way, if you want to follow it. It's just me getting fatter and fatter.
John is being very modest. He owns a meme network of over 10 million, so I think...
Yes, I do. That's what I do, by the way. I sort of... just went straight into introducing the boys, but Social Alchemist is a company that runs a meme network, pages like Made in Poor Taste, all UK-based. Stray Offside is our football one. Archbishop of Banterbury is one. No Context Footy on Twitter, which has grown immeasurably. I think we started that in September, and it's got like 600,000 followers on Twitter, but it's just posting things of no context. There's no effort that goes into that at all. It's the easiest thing we've ever done. What do you think platforms can be doing to help the growing industry? Instagram obviously now has strict sort of transparency for creators to disclaim when a post is paid for. How else can platforms like Snapchat, TikTok, Facebook help what you guys and myself are doing?
In terms of ad disclosure?
Yeah.
So I think... it's quite a difficult one, because the social networks themselves, especially Instagram, do a lot already. I think, they've launched their paid partnership feature, which has been great for, I guess, improving transparency. And even when you post something which they think might be an advert, they actually suggest to you, should you be adding the paid partnership feature? So the social networks are clearly doing a lot. It often comes down to, I guess, the creators not perhaps understanding what the legislation actually is, or perhaps choosing to ignore it.
Yeah.
Both two things there. We launched a tool called AdverAudit.com, essentially free tool to the market, which allows you to put in Instagram posts and it will tell you whether they're compliant with ASA and CMA regulation. So check it out if you want to check whether posts are compliant or not. Did it completely free because, again, helping educate the industry. But going to your question, I guess, what can they do more of? I think they are doing a lot, and perhaps it's just a case of, workshops, but I'd probably put that towards us rather than necessarily the social networks. I think the social networks have built the tools for us to then help educate the creators and the advertisers further.
Yeah, but I think on top of that, I think it's also, there's different laws in different countries and so on, and it's up to the local governments in that country to say, if you're doing it wrong, then we're going to, fine you or do something. And I think so far, they have threatened and so on, but it's like, when you're driving a car, if, you might want to speed every now and then, and if you see that no one's getting pulled over, then you're like, oh, okay, hopefully this is going to be fine this time. So I think if people start...
You don't do that.
No, I don't do that. I've seen my mom do it.
The FTC just came out last week, or a couple of weeks ago, and they basically, the FTC is the regulation out in the States, they actually came out and said they were going to start issuing fines of up to $25,000, I believe, or maybe it was $40,000. I think it was $25,000. Let's go with that. But anyway, I think that's the step in the right direction because the CMA have previously hinted that could be where the industry is going to go, and it tends just to be slap on the wrist and then articles in the BBC and people just being like, oh, you're, I guess, picturing out the celebrities rather than actually the influencers, so it's not really having that much effect. But I think fines is a good way to help ensure that the industry itself grows up, because ultimately it needs to. Regulation isn't there as a negative. It's there to help support the industry for the longevity of the industry. So no, we're fully in support.
And protect the public.
Protect the public from, perhaps not seeing an advert when it could be an advert. God, I sound so passionate about regulation here.
What have been a few of the favourite campaigns that you've worked on in the last 12 months, and what exactly have you liked about them?
Should we say? I mean, one of the most, I guess my most favourite was the Arto Water one I mentioned with Pepsi. The reason I really liked that one was because we actually used artists to basically help design artwork around what the bottle was actually going to look like. And then, as I mentioned, it then got purposed on out-of-home adverts and tube adverts, which was really exciting. So that's one. The other one I really like is a collaboration we did with Vans. So the reason I love the Vans one so much is because we kind of flipped it onto the creators. So Vans came to us with a brief and basically said, we want creators to talk about their favorite pair of Vans. We were like, a little bit boring. So we were like, okay, that's the top level marketing strategy. Then we inserted the influencer element of the strategy by saying, okay, well, we want creators to submit stories to us about their most memorable moment wearing a pair of Vans. So we had creators submit stories about like the first time they got dumped, or perhaps, when they received their exam results, or when they got job offers. And it added that sort of emotion to the influencer campaign. So that was probably one of my favorites. And yeah, Van said it was one of their best ever brand awareness campaigns.
Yeah, I mean, those are some great examples of what we've done as a company. But I think in more broad terms, I think creators really love campaigns that allow them to do something they've always wanted to do, or give them access to something that they're a fan of. So as I mentioned earlier, yesterday I got to watch Tottenham get beaten, but I did enjoy the game because I got to go to the stadium. I'm a big fan of Tottenham Hotspurs. So that was, and I got like I got to go on the side of the field, which was only something hotels.com could give me access to. So when I show that to my audience is like, oh yeah, obviously he loves Tottenham, and this is a great thing for him to be able to do, and they get behind it and they thank hotels.com and they support the brand.
It's unfortunate about the Spurs thing, for sure.
I know. Look, we've lost a few strikers.
Spurs fan, United fan, Chelsea fan, none of us are doing well up there.
Well, we're playing Chelsea this weekend, so
we'll win.
Good. No.
Aside from your company, What other campaigns have impressed you the most this year? Not as in the last sort of
So
6
aside
weeks,
from
12
the
months.
social chain campaign I mentioned, another campaign is probably Jerry Media's one recently. I'm sure you guys have seen it in the press. It's about the Bloomberg and meme pages. Essentially, what he did is he tried to take a bit of a humor approach to his campaign, where he got meme pages to start posting out about how cool he was as a president or how uncool he was. I think that had quite a lot of virality attached to it. And it got other meme pages who weren't even paid to be promoting it to then start promoting it. And it's that sort of type of campaign which, I guess has that effect because it's quite, I guess, like funny and people just want to be sharing it naturally.
And this is not a traditional type of campaign, but it's kind of, it was a way to promote a product called DAZN, which is it's like a matchroom boxing or a boxing a place where you can view your favorite fights. And instead of just saying no to getting YouTubers to come on and fight on there, they say yes, let's bring them on, let's get this new audience in, and then maybe they'll fall in love with the sport. So the KSI Logan Paul fights, I think DAZN getting involved with them was just a massive win for them as a company.
I mean, this thing's flashing at me now, and it's quite intimidating. So I think that's it for this session. I hope you've all enjoyed it and got some wonderful insight into the world of influencer marketing. Add me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and me. I add you as well.
Hey, let's add each other. Yeah, for sure.
Cheers.
Listen, this is networking. I'd like to introduce to the stage Mr. Ben Jeffries and Mr. Caspar Lee from Influencer. My name's John O'Yates. I run a company called The Social